Hello, this is an introduction to the Global Carbon Reward and the Carbon Pricing Matrix. The Global Carbon Reward is a market-based policy for mitigating climate change, and the Carbon Pricing Matrix is a diagram that explains how the Global Carbon Reward relates to other market policies. The matrix is also used to describe and explain the utility of the various ways to price carbon. In this short 7-minute presentation, I will introduce some key concepts behind the carbon pricing matrix and the new climate policy. Let's start by describing the carbon pricing matrix. It is structured around 2 rows and 2 columns. The 2 rows are denoted as carrots and sticks. Carrots and sticks are the 2 key options for the store of value of the instruments that are used to create these market-based policies. Carrots represent positive incentives and sticks represent negative incentives. The columns of the matrix are denoted as fiat on the left and carbon on the right. These represent the 2 main options for the unit of account of the instruments that are used to hold and trade value. Let's consider the carbon tax first. It occupies the bottom left quadrant of the matrix, so the carbon tax is a stick because it's a negative price signal, and the carbon tax is paid in national fiat currency. The bottom right corner of the matrix is occupied by cap and trade, also called the Emissions Trading Scheme, or ETS in Europe. The reason it occupies that quadrant is because the instrument is a pollution allowance. The pollution allowance can be traded, and it has units of carbon by mass. The top left corner of the matrix is occupied by the carbon subsidy. It's a carrot. It's a positive incentive, and it's paid by government using national fiat currency, or as a tax deduction denominated in the same national currency. This leaves one more policy to complete the carbon pricing matrix. This is where we introduce the new policy called a global carbon reward. A carbon reward is a carrot, but it's unique because the instrument that is used to pay the reward is indeed a carbon currency. It's a currency denominated in carbon units, so that's the foundation of the carbon pricing matrix, referring to 2 of the key functions of money. Let's now look more closely at the carbon tax and the new policy called a carbon reward. What's special about the carbon pricing matrix is that it includes a hypothesis that the carbon tax is ideally suited to the task of managing the efficiency of markets, whereas the carbon reward is ideally suited to the task of managing the probabilities of experiencing unwanted climate change. It is this duality of objectives and the way it's associated with these 2 policies that differentiates the carbon pricing matrix from the standard theory of market pricing. Considering this is the case, we might ask the question, why would we use a carbon tax to manage the efficiency of markets? The social justification is embodied in the principle called the Polluter pays principle, which is well known. The justification for the carbon reward is based on a new principle, which we propose, called the Preventative insurance principle. So the social justification is framed by the concept of insurance, which is used to manage risk. So this is an important point about the entire carbon pricing matrix, that we have introduced these 2 decision paradigms, one being efficiency, denoted as yellow, and the other being probability, denoted as blue. When economists assess the carbon tax, typically they will use integrated assessment models to provide a best estimate of the social cost of carbon. When the carbon reward is assessed, a different approach will be used. The carbon reward is based on the risk cost of carbon, which is the ideal carbon reward, and it is estimated from risk assessments. It's based on probability density functions for successful climate mitigation. In other words, it's based purely on probabilities. The carbon reward is useful for managing risks because it provides a policy that can be implemented globally and supported by the world's central banks. It offers scalable targeted finance. There are no direct costs for citizens, businesses, or governments because the costs are monetized. It can resolve time discounting dilemmas because the risk cost of carbon is not time discounted. It can be used to formally address systemic risks, and it funds carbon dioxide removal at the scale needed to achieve the Paris Agreement. Now that we've looked at the four policies, let's consider the carbon pricing matrix in terms of social science experiments on human cooperation. There are at least 3 published studies on the effects of carrot and stick incentives on human cooperation in competitive games. The finding is that a combination of carrots and sticks achieves an optimum level of cooperation amongst people. Let's have a look at the carbon pricing matrix in terms of these levels of cooperation, starting with the carbon tax. Using the carbon tax alone is using a strong stick, but because it's biased towards sticks, the level of cooperation is minimal and not optimal. If we introduce cap and trade in addition to carbon taxes as another option, we may see a marginal increase in cooperation because the cap and trade policy introduces new social and biophysical relationships. Once again, if we introduce the carbon subsidy, this can significantly improve cooperation because we're introducing carrots, which helps to balance sticks with carrots. However, the carbon subsidy is still far from optimum because we haven't employed the fourth policy of the matrix, which includes the other social and biophysical relationships and thus achieves the optimum in human cooperation. It's this achieving of the optimum between carrots and sticks which is the strength of the carbon pricing matrix, and indeed the recommendation is to apply the entire matrix. That concludes this short introduction to the global carbon reward and the carbon pricing matrix. We hope this has piqued your interest in this climate policy initiative. Please see the other video presentations and our new website, globalcarbonreward.org, for more information on the carbon pricing matrix and the new climate policy. If you have questions or offers of support, please submit them to info@globalcarbonreward.org. Thank you.